You've been told that debt is the enemy. But what if this common advice is actually preventing you from building real wealth? Imagine your financial journey as a strategic game of chess. Sometimes sacrificing a pawn protects your king. In this video, I'll challenge the conventional wisdom about debt with an approach based on mathematical reality rather than emotional reactions. I'll walk you through a simple yet powerful framework that helps you determine when aggressive debt repayment makes sense and when investing might be the smarter move. By the end, you'll have a clear decision-making system that puts you firmly in control of your financial future. The debt payoff trap most people fall into. What if I told you that your financial advisor's #1 tip might actually be making you poorer? I know it sounds crazy, but hear me out. That advice to pay off all your debt as fast as possible might be the very thing keeping you from building real wealth. You've probably heard it 1,000 times from every money guru with a podcast or YouTube channel. Debt is evil. Crush it at all costs. They preach this universal truth that the road to financial freedom is paved with debt-free living. And honestly, it sounds great in theory. Who doesn't want to be completely debt-free? But here's what those financial celebrities often leave out. Not all debt is created equal. There's a massive difference between high-interest credit card debt that's draining your bank account and a low-interest mortgage or student loan that barely keeps pace with inflation. Yet so many popular financial personalities lump it all together as toxic debt that needs to be eliminated before you can start building wealth. Dave Ramsey, one of the most famous voices in personal finance, tells his millions of followers to attack all debt with gazelle intensity, regardless of the interest rate. Susie Orman hammers home that being debt-free should be your primary financial goal. These messages get repeated so often that they've become financial gospel for many Americans. The problem? This one-size-fits-all advice creates a dangerous blind spot. While you're throwing every extra dollar at paying down that 3% mortgage or 4% student loan, you might be missing out on investment opportunities that could yield 8%, 10%, or even more over the long term. This gap can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime. Consider Sarah's story. She spent 5 years aggressively paying off her $30,000 student loan with a 3.5% interest rate. She put an extra $500 a month toward that debt, determined to eliminate it quickly. She felt triumphant when she made that final payment. But what Sarah didn't realize was devastating. If she had just paid the minimum and invested that extra $500 monthly in a total market index fund with an average 8% return, she would have ended up with around $35,000 in her investment account after those same 5 years. In her rush to become debt-free, Sarah effectively paid $35,000 to save about $2,800 in interest. The math shows this was a terrible financial decision. This mindset becomes a psychological trap, like running on a treadmill pointed away from your destination. You're moving furiously, feeling accomplished with each step, but actually getting further from your wealth-building goals. The emotional satisfaction of making those debt payments becomes addictive, even when the numbers clearly show it's not the optimal strategy. The really shocking part? Millions of Americans are caught in this trap, spending years aggressively paying off low-interest debt while the stock market climbs without them. According to a Bankrate survey, about 63% of Americans with student loans have delayed investing for retirement because they wanted to focus on eliminating their student debt first, regardless of the interest rate. Let me put some real numbers on this. Let's say you have $50,000 in student loans at 4% interest, and you're trying to decide whether to use your extra $6,000 a year to pay them down faster or invest. If you focus solely on debt payoff, you'll be debt-free in about 7 years and save around $6,000 in interest. Sounds good, right? But if you made minimum payments and invested that $6,000 annually in an index fund earning an average 8% return, after those same 7 years, you'd have about $55,000 in investments, while still owing some student loan balance. Your net worth would be roughly $15,000 higher than if you'd focused only on debt payoff. Now multiply that effect over decades. With compound growth, that $15,000 difference could snowball to $50,000 or more by retirement age, all because you followed the conventional wisdom. This is about the power of compound growth over time. Every year you delay investing is a year you can never get back. Einstein supposedly called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world, and the principle remains true. Time in the market is often more important than timing the market. When you focus exclusively on debt payoff, you're sacrificing those early, incredibly valuable years of compound growth. If you started investing at 25 instead of 35, after spending a decade becoming debt-free, that 10-year head start could mean hundreds of thousands of dollars more at retirement. High-interest debt absolutely should be eliminated quickly. Credit cards charging 18 to 25% interest, payday loans, and other predatory lending products will definitely drag down your finances faster than most investments can build them up. But the blanket approach of paying off all debt before investing could be making you significantly poorer long-term. Banks and financial institutions understand this math perfectly. That's why the wealthiest individuals and most successful corporations rarely rush to pay off low-interest debt. They leverage that cheap money to invest in assets that grow faster than the debt costs them. They're playing a game based on mathematical reality rather than emotional satisfaction. The more balanced approach starts with recognizing that debt elimination and wealth building aren't sequential steps. They're parallel tracks that should operate simultaneously. The key is prioritizing where each dollar goes based on mathematical return, not emotional relief. That might mean building an emergency fund first, then eliminating high-interest debt, then splitting your extra money between moderate interest debt paydown and investments, while making only minimum payments on your lowest interest debts. This nuanced approach requires more thought, but the financial rewards can be enormous. I can already hear some of you thinking, but I hate debt. I just want it gone regardless of what the math says. The psychological burden of debt is real. But we need to ask ourselves whether that emotional relief is worth potentially hundreds of thousands in lost wealth over our lifetimes. For many people, once they see the actual numbers, the answer becomes clear. The math your bank hopes you never learn. The historical average returns of major market indexes tell a powerful story that banks understand perfectly. Those numbers I mentioned earlier represent the math that banks are counting on you never learning. While you're obsessing over becoming debt-free, financial institutions are profiting from the spread between what they charge you and what they earn by investing that same money. That spread is where the real wealth-building opportunity lives. Let's get real about interest rates. When you take out a loan, you're essentially renting money, with the interest rate as the rental fee. Banks charge you while simultaneously investing their other capital into markets that historically return much higher percentages than what you're paying them. When a bank offers you a mortgage at 6%, they're doing it because they can deploy their other capital into investments that have historically returned 10 to 12% annually over the long term. This is what the S&P 500 has delivered over several decades. The bank makes money on the difference between what they charge you and what they earn elsewhere, banking fundamentals that rarely enter debt-free conversations. Think of debt like planting a garden. Paying off high-interest debt is like removing weeds that choke out growth. But paying off low-interest debt early is like pulling out small weeds while ignoring the ripening vegetables. You might have a cleaner garden in the short term, but you've sacrificed the abundant harvest that was weeks away. If you have a mortgage at 6% and could invest money that would potentially earn 10% over the long term, there's a 4% spread in your favor. Essentially free money most people overlook because they focus solely on eliminating debt. Credit cards function differently. With interest rates frequently exceeding 20%, virtually no investment can reliably outpace that cost. Banks profit tremendously when you carry these balances because the spread works decisively in their favor. Low-interest debts create opportunities for mathematical arbitrage, making money on the difference between two rates. Your mortgage might be around 6 to 8%, and federal student loans often carry even lower rates. Consider a concrete example. You have an extra $10,000 and are deciding between putting it toward your mortgage with a 3% interest rate or investing it in a diversified portfolio with potential 8% annual returns over the long term. Putting $10,000 toward your mortgage saves about $300 in interest the first year, guaranteed no risk. However, investing that same $10,000 at an 8% return would make about $800. After subtracting the $300 in mortgage interest you're still paying, you're ahead by $500, a 5% spread working in your favor rather than the bank's. The power of this strategy compounds over time. After 10 years, paying down your mortgage would have saved roughly $3,000 in interest. But investing the money at an 8% average annual return would grow your $10,000 to about $21,600. Even accounting for the mortgage interest you continued paying, you're still ahead by over $15,000. Banks aren't eager to see you pay off your low-interest loans early because they understand the mathematical advantage of spreads. When they loan you money at 3 to 6%, they're confident they can make more elsewhere. Recognizing which debts deserve aggressive payoff and which might actually be mathematical advantages is crucial. The key is the spread, the difference between your debt's interest rate and what you could reasonably expect to earn by investing. Where's the mathematical tipping point? Many financial experts suggest debts with interest rates below 6 to 7% might be worth keeping while you invest the difference, especially with a long time horizon. Above that threshold, debt payoff becomes the better choice. This approach assumes your investments earn their expected returns, introducing risk. The market doesn't rise in a straight line, but history shows that over long periods, major market indexes have delivered returns significantly outpacing low-interest debt costs. The advantage grows stronger with tax-advantaged accounts. A 401k with employer matching gives you 50 to 100% immediate returns before any market growth. No debt payoff strategy competes with that. Additionally, mortgage interest may be tax-deductible, effectively lowering that debt's cost, while retirement accounts compound tax-free or tax-deferred. Some will ask, but what about risk? You're right, investments have uncertainty. This strategy works best for people with 1. Stable income and solid emergency savings. 2. A long investment time horizon, ideally 10 plus years. 3. The emotional tolerance to ride out market fluctuations. This is the calculus wealthy individuals and institutions use daily. They understand that strategically maintaining certain low-interest debts while investing the difference accelerates wealth building over time. Banks benefit when you keep high-interest debt while paying off low-interest debt early. This approach maximizes their profits while minimizing your wealth-building potential. If paying off all debt immediately was truly optimal, why would banks practically beg people with excellent credit to take out low-interest loans? They understand spread mathematics that most debt-free gurus never mention. Next time you feel pulled to throw extra money at your low-interest mortgage or student loan, ask yourself, am I making this decision based on mathematics or emotions? There's nothing wrong with prioritizing the emotional relief of debt freedom, but you should know the potential opportunity cost. The debt priority pyramid you need to follow. That opportunity cost is exactly why not all debt deserves the same treatment in your financial plan. Ever noticed how banks are super aggressive about getting you to pay off certain debts, but seem oddly patient about others? They're using a secret priority system that determines which debts truly damage your finances and which ones might actually benefit them more than you. Let me introduce you to the debt priority pyramid, a strategic framework that tells you exactly which debts deserve your immediate attention and which ones you can take your time with. And spoiler alert, it's probably not what your favorite financial guru has been preaching. You've probably heard the popular advice to pay off your smallest debts first for those psychological wins. Just snowball those small balances and feel the victory. But here's the thing. While that might feel good emotionally, it could be a mathematical disaster if you're attacking the wrong debts first. Think of your debts like a house on fire. Some rooms are completely engulfed in flames, high-interest debt. Some have smoke but no visible fire yet, moderate interest debt. And some just have a small candle burning that's actually providing you light, low-interest strategic debt. You wouldn't ignore the burning bedroom to blow out a useful candle, right? That's essentially what happens when you ignore interest rates and just focus on balance size. Let's break down this pyramid, starting at the top. Financial emergency debts, top tier. These high-interest nightmares should be extinguished immediately. Credit card balances, 18 to 25% rates. Predatory payday loans can exceed 400% APR. These debts are actively destroying your financial house every day. If you have a $5,000 credit card balance at 22% interest, you're losing about $1,100 a year just to interest. No reasonable investment can reliably outpace that kind of loss. Every dollar you throw at these debts gives you an instant, guaranteed return equal to the interest rate you're avoiding. The it depends zone middle tier. These moderate interest debts require strategic thinking. Personal loans. Most student loans. Car loans, typically 5 to 10%. The decision to prioritize these debts or invest instead hinges on a straightforward comparison. Is the expected return on your investments likely to beat the interest rate on the debt? If your student loan is at 6.5% and you expect investments to return 8 to 10% on average, the math suggests making minimum payments and investing the difference. Your risk tolerance matters here too. Investment returns aren't guaranteed, while debt interest is. Some people sleep better at night with less debt, even if it means potentially lower overall returns. Personal finance involves both math and your relationship with money. Strategic low-interest debts, bottom tier. These can actually be financial tools, mortgages, certain federal student loans, typically below 5%. For many people, these low-interest debts shouldn't be priority targets for aggressive paydown. The long-term mathematical advantage often tilts heavily toward making minimum payments while directing extra cash toward investments. These debts often come with tax advantages that further reduce their effective cost. Take a mortgage at 4% interest. After accounting for the mortgage interest tax deduction, if you itemize, the effective rate might be closer to 3%. If your investments grow at 8 to 10% on average, you're potentially leaving thousands of dollars on the table by prioritizing early mortgage payoff over investing. The tax code doesn't treat all debts equally. Mortgage interest can provide valuable tax deductions for many homeowners. Student loan interest, up to certain limits, can also be deductible regardless of whether you itemize. When you factor in these tax benefits, the effective interest rate on some debts drops even lower, strengthening the case for keeping them while investing. What makes this pyramid approach powerful is that it forces you to make decisions based on mathematical reality rather than emotional impulses. By categorizing your debts this way, you create a clear roadmap for financial decision-making that optimizes for long-term wealth building. Let's put this into practice. Imagine you have $1,000 extra each month and these three debts. Credit card, $8,000 at 20% interest. Car loan, $15,000 at 7% interest. Mortgage, $250,000 at 4% interest. Following the debt priority pyramid, you'd throw everything at the credit card first, saving yourself $1,600 per year in interest. Once that's gone, you'd evaluate whether to attack the car loan or start investing based on your expected returns and risk tolerance. For the mortgage, making the minimum payment while investing the difference would be the mathematical winner for most people. I'm not saying you should never pay off low-interest debt early. There are legitimate reasons someone might want to be completely debt-free, peace of mind, simplified finances, or preparing for a major life change. But those decisions should be made with full awareness of the potential opportunity cost, not because all debt is bad as a blanket rule. The beauty of the debt priority pyramid is that it gives you a flexible framework that adapts to your unique situation. It acknowledges that certain debts are financial emergencies requiring immediate attention, others require careful consideration, and some might actually be beneficial tools when used strategically. The magic interest rate number that changes everything. While our debt pyramid gives us a solid strategy for prioritizing which debts to tackle first, there's actually a specific mathematical threshold that determines whether you should even pay extra on your debt at all. I call it the crossover point. That precise moment where your money works harder in investments than it does eliminating debt. And here's the kicker. This number is different for everyone. So what exactly is this crossover point? Simply put, it's the interest rate on your debt where the math says stop paying extra. If your debt's interest rate is below this number, you're mathematically better off investing your extra cash instead of making additional debt payments. If it's above this number, then accelerating your debt payoff makes more financial sense. What makes this concept so powerful is that it's based on cold, hard mathematics rather than emotional reactions to debt. The calculation at its core is surprisingly straightforward. You're directly comparing the interest rate on your debt against what you could reasonably expect to earn through investing. When investment returns exceed debt interest, the mathematical advantage shifts toward investing. This crossover point isn't fixed. Your personal crossover point fluctuates based on a variety of factors that are unique to your situation. Let's start with investment options. Different asset classes deliver vastly different returns. Stocks have typically offered higher average returns compared to bonds, but with greater volatility and risk. Real assets like real estate often move with inflation, potentially serving as a hedge against rising costs. Understanding these varying return profiles is crucial for accurately calculating your crossover point. Your tax situation dramatically impacts this calculation too. If you have access to an employer-sponsored 401k with matching contributions, this immediately alters your crossover point. An employer matching 50% of contributions up to 6% of your salary provides an immediate 50% return before any market growth. This drastically lowers your crossover point, making it mathematically advantageous to invest rather than pay down even moderately high-interest debt. Tax deductions play a huge role too. Mortgage interest deductions effectively reduce the true cost of mortgage debt for those who itemize. If you're in the 22% tax bracket, a 4% mortgage effectively costs closer to 3.1% after tax savings, potentially pushing this debt well below your crossover point. The current economic environment also influences your crossover point. The Federal Reserve's monetary policy decisions directly impact both debt costs and investment returns. When the Fed raises interest rates, it affects both sides of the equation. Higher rates can make bonds more attractive as investments, potentially raising the crossover point for some investors. Your personal risk tolerance is another massive factor. A conservative investor uncomfortable with market volatility might have a crossover point around 4 to 5%, meaning they'd prioritize paying down debts above that threshold. A moderate investor comfortable with some market fluctuations might have a crossover point around 5 to 7%. An aggressive investor with high risk tolerance might have a crossover point of 7 to 9% or higher. Inflation is another critical piece many overlook. During periods of high inflation, the real value of fixed-rate debt decreases over time, effectively lowering the true cost of your debt. This can push your crossover point higher. Let's walk through calculating your personal crossover point with a simple example. Meet Sarah, a 35-year-old professional with 22% tax bracket, moderate risk tolerance, access to employer 401k with 50% match up to 6%, 4.5% mortgage, 6% car loan, 3.5% student loan. Step 1. Sarah estimates her expected investment return based on her moderate risk profile, 7%. Step 2. She adjusts for tax benefits. Mortgage, after tax deduction 3.51% effective rate. Student loan interest deduction, 2.73% effective rate. Car loan, no tax benefit, remains 6%. Step 3. She factors in her employer match, which boosts her effective investment return to approximately 8.5% for the matched portion. Step 4. Comparing these numbers, Sarah's personal crossover point is approximately 6.5%. This analysis reveals that Sarah should pay minimum on mortgage and student loans below crossover, accelerate payments on her car loan just below crossover but close enough to prioritize, maximize 401k contributions to capture the full employer match. The clarity this calculation provides has transformed financial decision-making for many viewers. Mark, a longtime follower, shared how discovering his personal crossover point of 5.2% completely changed his approach to his finances. For years I struggled with whether to invest or pay off my 4.8% mortgage faster, he wrote. Once I calculated my crossover point, the decision became crystal clear, and I finally felt relief knowing my choice was mathematically sound. This approach demystifies debt decisions by replacing emotional reactions with mathematical precision. For most Americans with moderate risk tolerance, access to tax-advantaged retirement accounts, and a long-term investment horizon, the crossover point typically lands somewhere between 5 to 7%. The beauty of understanding your personal crossover point is that it removes emotion from the equation and replaces it with mathematical clarity. It acknowledges that strategic debt management isn't about eliminating all debt as quickly as possible. It's about optimizing your overall financial picture to build maximum wealth over time. Once you've determined your personal crossover point, decision-making becomes remarkably clear. Debts above your number get prioritized for accelerated payoff. Debts below your number receive minimum payments while you direct extra cash toward investments. This simple framework adapts to changing conditions. Tale of two savers, a shocking comparison. Math is one thing, but seeing these principles play out in real life is what truly drives the point home. Let's step away from theory and look at what happens when real people make different choices with the same resources. I want to introduce you to Sarah and Mike, two professionals who started with identical financial situations but made completely different choices about how to handle their debt and investments. Sarah and Mike both earn $75,000 a year and start with $20,000 in debt at a 6% interest rate. They're basically financial twins at the starting line. The only difference, their approach to handling that debt. Sarah follows conventional wisdom: pay off all debt before investing a single dollar. Mike takes a more balanced approach, making minimum payments on his low-interest debt while simultaneously investing. Sarah's journey feels good initially. She throws 50% of her disposable income at her debt with laser focus. That emotional high of watching your debt balance shrink is real. I've been there myself. After about 3 years of aggressive payments, Sarah celebrates becoming completely debt-free. No more monthly statements, no more interest payments. She feels an incredible sense of accomplishment and relief. But there's a hidden cost to Sarah's approach that doesn't show up on her debt statements. During those 3 years of intense debt focus, Sarah invested exactly $0. Not a penny was working for her in the market. While she was eliminating a 6% drain on her finances, she missed out on years of potential market growth that could have been compounding all that time. Meanwhile, Mike takes a completely different path. Instead of throwing everything at his debt, he makes the minimum payments on his 6% loans while simultaneously investing 10% of his income in a diversified portfolio. His strategy acknowledges a simple truth: not all debt is created equal, and some debt can be strategically managed while building wealth elsewhere. In year 1, Sarah reduces her debt to around $12,000. Her net worth improves, but only because she's reducing a negative, not building assets. Mike reduces his debt more slowly to about $18,000, but accumulates around $7,500 in investments. Their total net worth remains similar. By year 3, the divergence becomes noticeable. Sarah celebrates becoming debt-free. Her net worth equals her emergency fund savings. Mike still carries about $14,000 in debt, but his investment portfolio has grown to around $24,000. Even subtracting his remaining debt, Mike's net worth is already pulling ahead. Now here's where things get interesting. With her debt gone, Sarah finally starts investing. But she's 3 years behind Mike's head start. And in investing, time transforms into money through compound growth. By year 5, Sarah has been investing for 2 years with about $20,000 in her portfolio. Meanwhile, Mike's investments have grown to around $45,000, with his debt down to $10,000. His net worth stands at approximately $35,000 compared to Sarah's $20,000. The gap widens considerably. Then life throws its inevitable curveball. In year 6, both experience a market downturn, with their portfolios taking a 15% hit. Sarah's investments shrink to $17,000, while Mike's fall to about $38,000. They both receive modest raises, offering some cushion during this difficult period. By year 8, the market recovers. Sarah's portfolio grows to about $45,000, impressive progress. But Mike's investments have ballooned to nearly $80,000, with his debt down to just $5,000. His net worth reaches $75,000 compared to Sarah's $45,000. The wealth gap expands to $30,000, despite identical incomes throughout. In year 9 comes another test. An unexpected $8,000 expense hits them both. Sarah must pull from her investments, setting back her progress. Mike absorbs the hit without touching his growing portfolio by temporarily redirecting some investment money to handle the expense. The final numbers after 10 years tell a compelling story. Sarah, $60,000 net worth, entirely in investments. Debt-free for 7 years. Mike, $100,000 in investments with just $2,000 remaining debt. Net worth, $98,000. That's a $38,000 difference. 63% higher net worth despite identical starting positions and incomes. Project this further, and the wealth gap could expand to hundreds of thousands of dollars over the next 20 years. All from a simple strategic decision about balancing debt versus investing. Sarah didn't make a terrible choice. Being debt-free provided her with tremendous psychological benefits and flexibility. But from a wealth-building perspective, Mike's balanced approach proved mathematically superior. By recognizing that the potential 7% return on investments exceeded his 6% interest debt, Mike created a positive spread that compounded dramatically over time. This comparison reveals something counterintuitive. Someone carrying debt for years can actually end up wealthier than someone who aggressively eliminated every penny they owed. It's about strategic allocation of resources based on mathematical realities instead of emotional satisfaction. The key insight isn't about specific numbers. It's about recognizing that debt decisions shouldn't be made in isolation from investment opportunities. When you focus exclusively on eliminating debt without considering potential investment growth during that same period, you're potentially leaving significant wealth on the table. Both Mike and Sarah were diligent with their finances. Both were responsible. Both improved their financial situations considerably. But Mike's strategy of balancing debt repayment with consistent investing led to substantially better financial outcomes. He recognized that money is fungible, and its best use isn't always debt repayment when investment returns exceed interest costs. This happens in real life every day. The person aggressively paying down their 4% mortgage while contributing nothing to their 401k might feel progress, but they're potentially sacrificing hundreds of thousands in future wealth. The psychology keeping you from building wealth. If the numbers so clearly favor Mike's balanced approach, why do so many people still choose Sarah's debt-obsessed path? It turns out your brain is hardwired with biases that make you feel good about paying off debt, even when it's mathematically terrible for your wealth. These psychological traps could be the difference between financial comfort and true wealth. Your brain isn't designed for long-term financial thinking. Neuroscience research shows that when you make financial decisions, your nucleus accumbens, the brain's reward center, lights up when you anticipate quick wins. That debt payoff celebration feels amazing. Meanwhile, your anterior insula, which processes negative emotions, activates when considering potential losses. This creates a perfect storm where the tangible joy of watching debt disappear overpowers the abstract notion of future investment growth. Think about the last time you paid off a debt, even something small like a credit card. Remember that rush of relief when you made the final payment? That sensation of crossing it off your list forever? Your brain released dopamine, the same chemical triggered by eating chocolate or seeing notifications pop up on your phone. It's like getting dozens of likes on a social media post versus putting money in a savings account that nobody will ever applaud you for. When you make an investment, there's no celebration, no finish line, just money seemingly disappearing with a promise it might grow someday. This psychological quirk explains why Sarah felt amazing becoming debt-free, while Mike's mathematically superior approach felt less satisfying in the moment. Our brains are essentially running outdated software, evolved for immediate threats and rewards, not 30-year investment horizons. The satisfaction of eliminating a debt today easily overwhelms the abstract concept of having 38% more wealth a decade from now. Researchers have identified specific cognitive biases that sabotage our financial decision-making. The overconfidence bias leads borrowers to overestimate their future ability to handle financial challenges. This is why people aggressively pay down debts, thinking they'll easily catch up on investments later, only to find themselves falling permanently behind the compound growth curve. The optimism bias causes borrowers to underestimate the likelihood of unexpected expenses. Sarah might think she'll have plenty of time to invest after becoming debt-free, failing to account for life's inevitable financial curveballs. Meanwhile, Mike's balanced approach builds an investment cushion that can absorb unexpected costs without derailing his wealth-building journey. Your personality traits significantly influence how you approach debt. Highly conscientious people often excel at making timely debt payments, but might obsess over eliminating debt at the expense of investment opportunities. Understanding your traits can help you develop strategies that work with your natural tendencies rather than against them. The endowment effect, our tendency to value things we already possess more highly, creates another trap. Money we borrow can feel less valuable than money we earn, making paying interest feel more painful than missing out on investment gains, even when the math clearly shows which option leaves you wealthier. These biases are reinforced by social pressure around being debt-free. Communities celebrate debt payoff milestones with cake and social media announcements. But nobody throws a party when you quietly max out your Roth IRA. The debt-free label carries social currency, while strategic debt manager with higher net worth doesn't exactly roll off the tongue at dinner parties. The stigma surrounding debt amplifies these psychological barriers. Many view debt as immoral, failing rather than a mathematical tool, creating guilt and shame that push them toward elimination at any cost. They spend years aggressively paying off low-interest student loans or mortgages to feel clean again, missing the chance to build significant wealth through investing. Perhaps most powerful is how loss aversion warps our perception of risk. Research shows we feel the pain of losses roughly twice as intensely as the pleasure of equivalent gains. This explains why the certainty of debt payoff feels safer than the temporary ups and downs of investing. Sarah chose the seemingly pain-free path of debt elimination, avoiding the emotional roller coaster Mike experienced during market fluctuations. Yet Mike's willingness to endure temporary discomfort ultimately rewarded him with substantially more wealth. The widespread fear of investment volatility represents one of the biggest wealth-killing psychological traps. Many people avoid investing entirely because they're terrified of losing money, yet this safe choice guarantees they'll miss out on the wealth-building power of compound growth. Meanwhile, inflation silently erodes their purchasing power, a hidden loss they never see on a statement. Breaking free from these psychological traps requires awareness and strategic planning. The most powerful approach combines automated systems with psychological tricks that work with your brain instead of against it. Setting up automatic investment contributions alongside debt payments removes the temptation to skip investing. Creating separate mental accounts for different financial goals helps overcome the tendency to prioritize debt elimination above all else. Take a moment to reflect on your own debt attitudes. Do you celebrate paying off debts but ignore your investment progress? Have you ever prioritized a low-interest debt because eliminating it felt good, rather than investing that money for potentially higher returns? Understanding your own psychological biases is the first step toward making truly wealth-optimizing decisions, rather than just emotionally satisfying ones. In the next section, we'll explore how to build a concrete plan that balances debt repayment with wealth building, working with your psychology instead of against it. What billionaires know about debt that you don't? While you're celebrating paying off your car loan, billionaires are actively taking on millions in new debt and getting richer because of it. It's a mind-blowing reality that challenges everything we've been taught about financial success. The ultra-wealthy don't avoid debt. They embrace it strategically as one of their most powerful wealth-building tools. This isn't reckless spending or poor money management. It's a calculated approach that puts their money to work in ways most of us never learned. Look at someone like Elon Musk. Despite being worth billions, he regularly takes out massive loans against his Tesla shares instead of selling them. Why would he do this? Because he understands something fundamental. Strategic debt can actually make you richer when used correctly. This wealth-building principle separates the financially savvy from those stuck in the debt avoidance mindset. The difference is striking. Middle-class financial philosophy often centers around becoming debt-free as quickly as possible. We're taught to cut up credit cards, make extra mortgage payments, and celebrate debt freedom as the ultimate financial goal. Meanwhile, the wealthy are doing exactly the opposite. They're strategically using debt to expand their wealth while keeping their capital working for them in higher returning investments. This wealth-building approach relies heavily on leverage, using borrowed money to control far more assets than you could with just your own cash. Think about real estate investors who put 20% down on properties. With $100,000, they don't buy just one $100,000 property. They control 5 properties worth $500,000. If those properties appreciate by 5%, they haven't made $5,000, 5% of $100,000. They've made $25,000, 5% of $500,000. This multiplier effect is why leverage is so powerful when used correctly. Similarly, Warren Buffett uses leverage through his company Berkshire Hathaway. The company maintains significant debt while simultaneously holding huge cash reserves. This might seem contradictory. Why not just pay off the debt with the cash? Because Buffett knows he can earn returns that exceed his borrowing costs, creating wealth through the spread between the two rates. While many middle-class families proudly aim to pay off their homes early, wealthy individuals often maintain their mortgages for the full term. Mark Zuckerberg, despite his enormous wealth, reportedly has a mortgage on his home. With historically low mortgage rates, often 3 to 4% in recent years, he can earn much more by keeping his capital invested elsewhere, borrowing at a low rate and investing at a higher rate, profiting from the difference. This same principle applies to businesses. Apple, one of the world's most cash-rich companies, has billions in debt despite having more than enough money to pay it off. They borrow at ultra-low rates and use that capital for growth opportunities and strategies that create more shareholder value than simply eliminating their debt would. The wealthy also understand how inflation works in their favor with fixed-rate debt. When you take out a 30-year mortgage at 4%, your monthly payment stays the same for 3 decades. Meanwhile, inflation gradually increases prices, wages, and asset values. This means you're paying back your loan with increasingly cheaper dollars over time, getting a discount on your debt simply by waiting. Imagine borrowing $300,000 for a home today. In 20 years, that $300,000 will have far less purchasing power, but your mortgage payment remains fixed. Your income will likely have increased with inflation, making those payments relatively smaller compared to your earnings. Meanwhile, the home's value has probably increased substantially, building your net worth while your debt burden feels lighter each year. The ultra-wealthy leverage this concept further with other people's money, or OPM. Rather than tying up their own capital, they use borrowed funds, often backed by assets they already own, to make new investments. Real estate developers rarely use much of their own cash. They secure financing from banks and investors to construct buildings that generate ongoing income. Their personal risk is limited, but their potential returns are substantial. Even Shark Tank's Kevin O'Leary follows this approach, preferring to finance business acquisitions partly through debt rather than using only his own capital, maintaining liquidity for other opportunities. Amazon exemplifies this strategy. In its early years, the company took on significant debt to build distribution centers, develop technology, and expand its product offerings. Had Jeff Bezos waited until Amazon generated enough cash to fund all this expansion internally, the company would be a fraction of its current size. The strategic use of debt accelerated Amazon's growth trajectory enormously. Many of us were raised with cautionary tales about debt, stories of credit card disasters, foreclosures, and bankruptcy. These warnings aren't wrong, but they're incomplete. They focus exclusively on the dangers of bad debt, while ignoring the potential of strategic debt used for appreciating assets and investments. The wealthy use debt almost exclusively to acquire or develop assets that can generate returns above the cost of the debt itself. This fundamental distinction explains why some people get buried by debt, while others use it as a springboard to greater wealth. You don't need billions to start applying these principles. The key is understanding the difference between bad debt that drags you down and strategic debt that can help build wealth when used carefully. Low-interest debt that allows you to control appreciating assets can be a powerful tool in your financial arsenal. Donald Trump once famously said, "I'm the king of debt. I love debt." While his financial choices have been controversial, the underlying principle remains sound. Strategic leverage can amplify returns significantly. This insight from Billionaires, that debt isn't something to fear, but rather a tool to deploy wisely, represents one of the most significant mindset shifts separating the ultra-wealthy from everyone else. Your personal debt investment calculator. The magic interest rate number shouldn't be a mystery. Yet how many of us actually know exactly when to pay off debt versus when to invest? Let's fix that right now with a calculation tool that will remove all the guesswork. Unlike those complex financial formulas that require an economics degree, this is something you can literally do on the back of a napkin or with your phone's calculator. Making financial decisions based on gut feelings or what your Uncle Bob told you at Thanksgiving dinner isn't effective. The wealthy use simple math to determine exactly where each dollar should go. The basic formula puts the math on display. Compare your debt's interest rate to your expected investment return. If your debt costs 6% and you can reasonably expect to earn 8% investing, you're mathematically better off investing. That 2% spread represents real money that compounds over time. This is where most people hit an emotional wall. Even when the math clearly says invest, we often feel an overwhelming urge to eliminate debt first. Our brain has an automatic debt equals bad setting that overrides logical thinking. This calculator approach takes emotions out of the equation and replaces them with mathematical certainty. Let's walk through how to make this calculation in real-world scenarios. First, gather all your debts and note their interest rates. Be precise, don't round up or down, as even a 0.5% can significantly. impact your decision. For a mortgage at 4.25% or student loans at 5.75%, use those exact figures. Next, estimate your expected investment returns. If you're investing in a diversified portfolio, historical average returns have typically ranged from 6 to 10% depending on risk level and time horizon. Be conservative. For most people starting out, using 7% as your expected return provides a reasonable middle ground. Now subtract your debt interest rate from your expected investment return. This gives you your spread, the mathematical advantage of one option over the other. If positive, investing mathematically beats debt payoff. If negative, focusing on debt first makes more sense. Miscalculate this crossover point, and you could leave thousands of dollars on the table over your lifetime without ever realizing it. This basic calculation needs refinement with crucial real-world factors that can dramatically shift the equation. Tax advantages. Mortgage interest might be tax-deductible if you itemize. In the 22% tax bracket, a 4% mortgage effectively costs closer to 3.1% after tax benefits. Similarly, tax-advantaged accounts like 401k, S or IRAs can boost your effective returns through tax benefits. Employer matching. If your company offers a 50% match on 401k contributions, that's an immediate 50% return before market performance. This match should almost always take priority over debt repayment. Let's apply this. Say you have a student loan at 5.5% interest, and your employer offers a 50% match on your first 6% of 401k contributions. With 7% expected market returns, the employer match boosts your return to 57% on matched dollars. Contribute enough to get the full match before accelerating debt payments. Other important factors include investment time horizon. Longer investment periods benefit more from compound growth, risk tolerance. Mathematical certainty doesn't always overcome emotional discomfort with debt. Here's a practical decision tree to guide your process. 1. Emergency fund. Build 3 to 6 months of expenses before aggressive debt payments or investing. 2. Job security. In unstable positions, prioritize debt reduction even when math favors investing. 3. Evaluate debt interest rates through this hierarchy. Above 8 to 10%, pay off first, credit cards, private loans. 5 to 8%, the gray zone where personal situation determines the best approach. Below 5%, generally make minimum payments while investing, many mortgages, some student loans. 4. Consider investment options, particularly tax-advantaged accounts with employer matching. Here's a concrete example. Alex has $5,000 extra this year and is deciding between paying down a 6% student loan or investing. Alex's employer offers a 50% match on the first 4% of salary contributed to their 401k, not yet maxed out. Running our calculation, the student loan costs 6%. The 401k investment will likely earn around 7% market returns plus a 50% match on contributions. Even without the match, the 1% spread slightly favors investing. With the match, Alex should contribute enough for the full employer match before tackling the student loan. Inflation is another consideration. During high inflation periods, fixed-rate debt becomes less expensive in real terms. This creates another advantage for keeping low-interest, fixed-rate debt while investing. For inflation protection, consider diversifying with U.S. stocks and real assets, which have historically provided some hedge against rising prices. Some investors add Treasury inflation-protected securities, TIPS, to their portfolios for inflation protection, though they typically offer lower overall returns compared to other investments. The psychological aspect matters too. Creating visual progress trackers for both debt payoff and investment growth can help satisfy the emotional need to see progress while making mathematically optimal decisions. I've provided a simple calculation, but your specific situation might have additional complexities. For personalized guidance, consider consulting a financial advisor. The important thing is to make the biggest debt investment mistakes to avoid. But what happens when you follow all the mathematical rules and still end up worse off than when you started? I've seen people make the smart financial moves and lose thousands in potential wealth because they missed one critical factor. Financial advisors witness this mistake repeatedly across clients of all income levels, and it has nothing to do with interest rates. Let's talk about the emergency fund mistake, because it's costing people thousands of dollars. You're laser-focused on crushing debt or building your investment portfolio, but you've neglected to build a proper safety net. Then life happens, your car breaks down, your roof leaks, or you face unexpected medical bills. Without an emergency fund, you're forced to pull money from investments, often at the worst possible time, or rely on high-interest credit cards. This creates what financial advisors call the 2 steps forward, 1 step back syndrome. Like a leaky bucket that can't hold water no matter how much you pour in, your financial progress drains away with each emergency. You might spend months diligently paying down debt or building investments, only to have one emergency wipe out all your progress. Every financial emergency becomes a hole in your wealth-building container, ensuring you'll never reach your destination as quickly as someone who's properly prepared. The ripple effects are severe. Without that financial cushion, every unexpected expense becomes a potential crisis that disrupts your long-term financial strategy. You might be forced to liquidate investments during market downturns, triggering tax consequences and missing the eventual recovery. Or you might find yourself back in the high-interest debt cycle you worked so hard to escape. Speaking of backward moves, consider the mistake of liquidating investments to pay off low-interest debt. I've seen clients cash out investment accounts growing at 7 to 9% annually to pay off mortgages or student loans with 3 to 4% interest rates. This move feels responsible. You're eliminating debt, but mathematically, it's volunteering for a pay cut. The numbers tell the story. When you liquidate investments growing at higher rates than your debt interest, you're choosing to earn less money. This mistake costs clients tens of thousands in potential wealth growth over time. Once those investment funds are redirected to debt payment, they're no longer working for you in the market, missing years of compound growth that can never be recaptured. Another costly mistake is the snowball method for debt repayment. Financial gurus promote this approach. Pay off your smallest debts first, regardless of interest rate, to build momentum. While it provides emotional wins, it can be financially detrimental. When you prioritize small balances over high interest rates, your most expensive debts continue to grow unchecked. Those 18 to 25% credit card balances compound rapidly while you're paying off smaller, lower interest debts. Your overall financial picture deteriorates faster than necessary. Every misstep here becomes thousands of dollars lost later. Wealth that could have been building instead of servicing unnecessarily expensive debt. The mathematically optimal avalanche method tackles highest interest debts first. It might not give quick wins, but it minimizes total interest paid over time. The difference between these approaches amounts to significant money that could be directed toward building wealth instead. The silent wealth killer many overlook, ignoring tax-advantaged accounts while focused on debt repayment. When in debt elimination mode, it's tempting to throw every dollar at those balances. But skipping contributions to 401k, IRAs, and HSAs means missing powerful tax benefits that directly impact your wealth-building capacity. These accounts offer various advantages, from immediate tax deductions to tax-free growth and withdrawals, that can significantly boost your long-term financial position. The tax efficiency creates a mathematical advantage that often outweighs the benefits of accelerated debt repayment, especially for low to moderate interest debts. Many people aggressively pay down their mortgage while failing to max out retirement accounts. They focus on being debt-free, without realizing they're trading tax-advantaged growth potential for the psychological comfort of owning their home outright. Emotional financial decisions undermine mathematical reality. Building up unmanageable credit card balances remains one of the biggest financial mistakes. With interest rates often exceeding 20%, these high-interest debts quickly spiral out of control. Every dollar spent servicing these debts can't be invested or used to build financial security. The psychological weight of carrying this debt creates stress that affects decision-making in other areas of your financial life. What's troubling is how common these mistakes are, even among financially savvy people. You can follow conventional wisdom about becoming debt-free and still end up far behind someone who took a balanced, mathematical approach to finances. The good news: all these mistakes are avoidable. Creating a proper emergency fund before aggressively tackling debt or ramping up investments provides the foundation for sustainable financial progress. Analyzing the mathematical reality of debt interest rates versus potential investment returns helps you make decisions based on numbers rather than emotions. Understanding the proper sequencing of financial priorities enables you to maximize growth while minimizing unnecessary costs. Most financial advisors agree. The biggest mistake they see clients make is failing to establish that emergency fund before embarking on other financial goals. This single oversight triggers a cascade of problems that can derail years of progress. An emergency fund is insurance for your entire financial plan. It protects investments from untimely liquidation, shields you from high-interest debt when surprises occur, and gives you the stability to make rational financial decisions rather than panic moves during times of stress. The ultimate debt investment strategy for maximum wealth. That emergency fund protection is just the foundation, but what comes next could literally mean the difference between retiring comfortably or working well into your 70s. Most people get stuck in an endless cycle of debt management, never realizing they're following a financial script that was designed to keep them financially secure, not financially free. Let me introduce you to something that transformed my own financial journey. The 5-step debt investment blueprint that virtually no mainstream financial guru will share with you. Why? Because it challenges the debt is always bad story that's been drilled into our heads since childhood. This framework is the actual playbook used by wealth advisors working with clients who understand that strategic debt management combined with smart investing creates exponentially more wealth than the pay everything off first approach. Step 1. Build your financial safety net. The first step is non-negotiable, building your emergency fund. For gig workers or those with variable income, aim for 6 months of expenses. If you have stable employment with solid job security, 3 months might be sufficient. Keep this money in high-yield savings accounts that maintain liquidity while earning interest on your cash. Your emergency fund acts as financial insurance, protecting your entire wealth-building strategy from derailing when life throws curveballs. Without this foundation, even the best investment plan will crumble at the first unexpected expense. Step 2. Eliminate toxic debt. Step 2 focuses on eliminating toxic debt. High-interest obligations that mathematically guarantee you'll lose money compared to investments. This includes credit card balances, payday loans, and personal loans with double-digit interest rates. These debts actively destroy wealth and must be eliminated before serious wealth building can begin. Use the avalanche method. Tackle the highest interest rate debt first while making minimum payments on everything else. Every dollar toward a 20% interest credit card effectively earns you a guaranteed 20% return, better than almost any investment. Step 3. Capture free money. Once your emergency fund is set and toxic debt is eliminated, direct your next dollars to capture every penny of employer retirement matching before accelerating payments on other debts. This provides an immediate 50 to 100% return on your investment. For example, if your employer matches 50% of your first 6% retirement contribution on a $60,000 salary, that's $1,800 in free money annually. Passing this up to pay down a 4% mortgage faster is like turning down an $1,800 bonus to save $400 in interest. The math simply doesn't work. Step 4. Balance debt reduction and investments. This is where the real wealth-building magic happens. Strategically balancing remaining debt payments with investment contributions. For low-interest debts below your crossover point, make the minimum required payments and direct available cash toward investments. For example, if you have a student loan at 4.5% and your calculated crossover point is 5%, make only the minimum payments while investing the rest. However, with a personal loan at 8% and a crossover point of 7%, prioritize extra payments to that debt before increasing investments. This balanced approach maintains positive credit history while building investment assets that grow faster than your low-interest debts. Step 5. Accelerate wealth creation. As each debt is eliminated, immediately redirect those payment amounts to investments rather than expanding your lifestyle. This creates a powerful wealth-building snowball effect where your investment contributions grow automatically over time. When you finish paying off that $350 monthly car loan, immediately set up an automatic transfer for that same $350 into your investment accounts. Your budget won't feel the difference, but your wealth trajectory will change dramatically. Real-world impact. Sarah's story. Consider Sarah, who started with $50,000 in mixed debts and $5,000 in savings. She built a 4-month emergency fund, wiped out her 18% credit card debt in 8 months, then maximized her employer's 401k match while making minimum payments on her 3.5% student loans. After 5 years, she still had some student loan debt, but had accumulated over $75,000 in investments, dramatically increasing her net worth compared to if she'd focused solely on becoming debt-free. This strategy should flex with your life stage. In your 20s and 30s, be more aggressive with investments. As you approach retirement in your 50s and 60s, gradually shift toward debt reduction to enter retirement with fewer fixed obligations. Your income level matters too. Higher earners can often accelerate both debt payoff and investments simultaneously. Those with more modest incomes need to be more strategic about where each dollar goes. Set calendar reminders to review your strategy quarterly, tracking both debt reduction and investment growth. During these reviews, ask, have interest rates changed? Has my job security shifted? Have my financial goals evolved? Has my risk tolerance changed? Each might warrant adjustments to your debt investment balance. What makes this approach powerful is that it acknowledges both the mathematics and psychology of wealth building. It doesn't ignore the emotional benefits of debt reduction. It simply structures that journey to maximize long-term wealth rather than short-term emotional wins. Let's be real, we've shattered the myth that all debt is bad. The numbers don't lie. Strategic debt management paired with consistent investing builds substantially more wealth over time. Start by listing every debt with its interest rate, then compare those figures to potential investment returns. Create a personalized plan that aligns with your financial situation. Set clear goals, establish your budget, and automate savings today. The wealthy understand debt differently. They're debt smart, using low-cost capital to build assets that outpace liabilities. Now that you understand the strategy, it's time to transform your relationship with debt.